talk with Thariya. Our special guest is Rahama Haider Ali, a very young talent, and she has made global headlines with her book called Through Her Eyes, and it's on Amazon now. So, welcome to this episode, Rahama.
Thank you.
So, you wrote your poem when you were only 6 years old, right? The first poem, if I'm not mistaken. So,
Yes.
what was that poem about? Can you recall that?
I can't recall the exact poem, but I do remember what it was about.
Okay.
So it was I was in grade one that time,
All right.
and we had this school homework. So we had to write a poem as short as we can,
Okay.
and it around that same time. I can't remember what it was about, but
Oh,
I got into an argument with my mom, the
okay.
6-year-old me.
All right.
So basically, I wrote a poem complaining about her, criticizing her.
Okay, that's funny.
Yeah, so she still remembers that, and she always brings it up. It's
All
like,
right.
do you remember your first poem? You
Yeah, yeah,
criticized me in front of
yeah.
your whole class.
I'm pretty sure she does because you have criticized her on in your poem.
Yes.
Okay. So till about 14, you yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I didn't, sadly, I did not save that poem because I didn't know writing would become such a huge part of my life. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. So till about 14 years, you've been writing
Hmm.
poems, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So you still do that, or what has happened to those poems you have already created?
I have around like three notebooks or more, like filled with those poems. Like I
Okay.
haven't like got rid of them. They're still there at home.
Hmm.
Um, and then yeah, so I stopped poetry for a while when I got into like writing stories and stuff. But within like the past 1.5 years, I've again like tried my hand at poetry because so now I do both stories
Okay.
and poems.
So, any plans to publish a book on poems or any poem book?
Yes, I it's been on my mind for a while now. I want to not my old poems because I've improved so much in my writing.
Mm.
So maybe a new collection of poems,
Okay.
and I would actually maybe prefer getting that locally published instead of doing it through an international publisher this time.
All right. So, um, when did you like start, sensing that you can actually write? Like I'm not talking about poems, but about stories. When did you feel that?
It's actually I started out as like a bookworm,
Mm.
so I just fell in love with words. I mean, thanks to my mother because she used to read me like bedtime stories every
Okay.
night throughout my childhood.
All
So
right.
I fell in love with words and creating scenarios in my head and
Wow.
like
Okay. So
putting them
you're
to
a
life.
creative girl.
Yes. So yeah, I wanted to bring it to life. So I that's how I started like trying it out and I think I was around 14 when I decided I'll try my hand at writing my first ever story.
Mm.
So that I wrote like based on my real life experiences. So I had
Okay.
this
That's
close
interesting.
group of
Yeah.
friends,
Mm.
and like so they were also like I based characters on them,
Okay.
and like so I made them read it. I
Okay.
shared it to them. I would like
Mm.
email them chapters, and
Mm.
I made my mom also read it.
Mm.
And like they were very, I mean, they were very encouraging about it.
Mm.
So I mean, at first I thought, okay, maybe it's because I'm someone they love and care about, so they must just be praising me.
Yeah.
But no, eventually I guess I picked up confidence in myself too. I mean, others' belief in you only goes half the distance.
Mm.
The remaining half is your belief in yourself. So
Correct. Correct.
once I took that plunge, yeah, I got better.
Yeah. So, like, it's a very interesting way of actually, planning on writing a story because you based it on real people, and I
Yes.
am I'm pretty sure that the stories, that the nature of the authenticity must have come out of that
Yeah.
because it's all about real people.
Yes, that is something I get a lot from my readers. Even now, they say that there is this authenticity in my writing voice that they say it's really rare to find in books because I completely immerse myself in my stories, in my
Mm,
characters.
mm,
I leave pieces of myself in it. So I think the emotion sometimes like just jumps out of the pages.
mm. Yeah.
So,
So basically, like you told me that whenever you have written the first story, you were still 14, if I'm not mistaken.
mm.
Yeah. So at that time, you were composing poems as well.
Yes, I was composing poems. This was like after I took a break from poems. I thought
Ah,
to myself, let me try my hand at writing.
okay.
So then once I started writing the book, it like took up most of my time, my writing time. I mean, I
Mm,
couldn't like write the story and as well keep writing poems. It's
mm,
not the case now anymore. I'm good at juggling between both.
okay.
But back then, yeah, I couldn't.
Yeah. So what made you to shift your focus from, composing poems to story creation straight away? Any
Mm,
any reason, any inspiration? Anyone has motivated you to do that, or
it's not really about anyone motivating me. It's more like as a writer, I felt like poems could only be a particular length. I
yeah,
mean,
correct.
there's only you can't like drag it on for pages.
Of
You might
course.
as well write the story then.
And nobody will
So
read it then.
I
Yeah.
yeah. So I had at that time I felt like poems weren't enough to express whatever I wanted to express.
Mm,
If I had a theme or a concept I wanted to get into writing,
mm,
eventually like poems felt like it's not enough. Like I needed to build a whole fictional world around it,
mm,
and I needed characters there, so that um, it's easier to visualize. And there's nothing like getting to know a character and then going along with them through their growth,
mm.
their journey.
Yeah.
And so messages I wanted to spread, it was more effective through
Mm.
stories rather than poetry.
So basically, like, correct me if I'm wrong. So, like, when it comes to poems, the readability is low as opposed to reading a story because that interest is not there. If is it right, or the that's what I felt like, when I was actually listening to you.
Yeah, I think it depends on reader to reader. So for
Okay.
me as a reader, I think, yeah, I would prefer the depth that you find in books
Correct.
rather than what you find in poems.
Yes.
So for me, the first reader, the first audience that I have to prioritize is myself.
Of course.
So as a reader, if I prefer books to poems, then
Mm,
as a writer, that's what I prefer writing.
mm. Okay. So your story actually has a amazing traction on Wattpad, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So when did you join Wattpad?
April 2014. I was 16 then, 15
All
to
right.
16. Yeah.
Okay. So, like,
Um,
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, it was my best friend. So she's also a bookworm,
Okay.
and so she introduced me to this app. Um, she said, so there are a lot of books on here. I mean, it was free. You could just sign in, create an account, and read. She also was a reader on there at that time.
Mm, mm,
So and then she'd tell me what her favorite books are on that. And then, I added them to my library on there and started reading. And whenever we met at school, we would like fawn over the characters and fangirl over the books.
okay.
And so that's how I started out as a reader. And then eventually, I mean, there came a point where it felt too repetitive, or like the characters seemed to all be like
Limited.
fitted into stereotypes.
Okay.
And eventually I got tired of that, and I kept thinking, I want a book like this, I want a book like that with more depth. And because when I started reading that, the around 15, 16, like as a teenage girl, those seemed nice. But like eventually, as I matured and my mentality grew, I needed books with more, with more depth and maturity too.
mm,
So one day I was scrolling through I think it was Facebook or Instagram, I can't remember.
mm.
But basically, there was this post. I think it was aimed towards budding writers,
Okay.
but I stumbled across it by accident. So it said, "Write the book you want to read."
Okay. All right.
Just those 7 words,
Okay.
and my whole perspective changed.
Yeah.
It just took
Yeah.
those 7 words, and I was
It's
like, okay, fine. I'm not gonna look for that book. I'm gonna write that book.
mm.
So yeah,
So yeah, that statement actually it struck me. Write the book that you
Mhm.
want to read. Wow, man.
Yeah.
So then you started actually, got really motivated and like went after whatever the objectives that you had in your mind.
Yes, that's
And
that's what drove me.
yeah, and I must say that whatever the readings that you have done on Wattpad, like when you were
Yeah.
16, it must have actually given you, like the motivation and the insights that have actually helped you to come to the position that you are in at the moment, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it did. Because w- when I read those books, I mean, you are what you read, right? It has a huge influence on your mindset, your mentality,
Mm,
and your perspective. So at that age, when I was reading, nothing, it didn't like strike me as odd or wrong then, because there was all this huge hype around books like that. But then eventually, as I grew as a person, and then I saw the things that things didn't sit right with me anymore, and like I knew that the Wattpad reading community was made up of lots of early teens,
mm,
maybe between the ages 13 to 16.
mm,
And these books that they're reading, they're telling these these readers that these things are okay, what's happening is okay. And I realized that the gravity of that situation, and I
mm,
thought, no, someone needs to break this cycle. And there were quite a few writers at that time who were stepping up and writing healthier content.
mm,
But I didn't have that mentality where I thought to myself, okay, there are a few handful of people doing the right thing, I
mm,
can just turn a blind eye and let them do their job. I took that upon myself. I said, no, if there is a tiny difference that even I can make, then I want to make that difference. So
mm.
yeah, so that's what I really wanted to do.
Correct.
That's what lies in the core of all my writings, my
Mm.
need to make a difference, even if it's for one person, no matter how big, no matter how small. I I want to make a difference.
Correct. Correct. At the end of the day, that's what you should do. Like, add value to people and give different
Yes.
perspective. So then, they also can enjoy that and cherish the life. So
Yes.
let's talk about your book, Through Your Eyes. What moved you to write it and tell the whole story here?
Okay. Yes, true. Yeah, I could go on talking about it.
No problem.
So
It's your show.
so through your eyes, honestly, if you just ask me what drove me to start writing it,
Mm, mm.
it was frustration, it was anger, it was exhaustion.
Okay.
Because I was uh, I was really really exhausted with most of the stories that were like hitting the ranks on Wattpad, because Wattpad is a huge community, right?
Mm,
Because like I know there are some misconceptions surrounding it where people think it's just amateur writers who just post their things, but there are like proper, well written books on there, very
mm,
solid books that have won movie deals and even publishing contracts, just like mine.
mm.
So it's a huge community with more than 1 million users, and
Wow. Mm,
so and it's still growing. And at that time, I wrote Through Your Eyes when I think it was late 2017.
mm,
So when I was before writing that, it was all these books that were like ranking really high on Wattpad, and like, you know, that was like the highlight of the year.
mm,
Um, I didn't like, I tried to read them, most of them, but there was so much of, you know, glorification of arrogance
mm,
and romanticization of abusive behavior,
mm.
and where mental disorders were used as a plot device rather
Yeah.
than ad, you know advocating about it. And there was also a lot of slut shaming when it came to the women characters in the book.
Mm, mm.
And this and when now what on Wattpad, in the books, one of its greatest features is that you can vote for the chapters, and you can comment on every paragraph.
Ah,
So
okay.
it's
All right.
like writers can see the readers live reactions,
Mm,
and it's a nice, very inclusive community. But when I went through these comments, I can see how much the readers were thinking that this is okay. How much they were cheering for these kind of characters to come out of the winning side. And
mm,
I couldn't like wrap my head around it. I was like, like, what's happening? This is the current generation. This is our youth kids. They are the ones who are going to grow up and lead this world in the future.
mm,
And if this is what their mindset is like, it's not okay. I wasn't okay with it, and I wanted that. It annoyed me that there was all this going on, but no one was willing to like speak up. I knew a lot of them had problems with it too, and eventually I thought to myself, maybe, okay, fine, let me take that first step and let me write a book
mm.
where I can actually show these people what a good, healthy relationship looks like. Because Through Your Eyes, it falls under the romance category, right?
Okay.
So most of these books that were once spreading the right messages, those also fell under the young adult romance categories
Mm, mm,
and teen fiction books. And I was actually hesitant at first because I wasn't sure uh, people would like that, because at that time, the story that I had in mind, Through Your Eyes, it would be
mm.
something that requires you to step out of the box. It
Okay.
would be breaking the stereotypes,
Mm,
breaking the cycle that's been going on in the young adult book community for a long period of time.
mm,
And but then I thought, okay, if I can see what's wrong in this, if I can see the problem in these sort of stories, then I'm sure that there are others out there like me. But first and foremost, I wanted to write the book for me. So I started writing it on my laptop and sometimes on my phone. And there were friends I made on Wattpad. So
mm,
I sent a few chapters to one of my friends on there, and she really liked it,
mm,
and she encouraged me to go ahead and post it. And so I did that. She really motivated me. Without her, I don't think I would have posted it. So I posted my first chapter, and I had already like a small group of friends on there from different countries, and so they hyped me up, and they started voting and commenting on the book. And like, I was satisfied with that small network at first, and I kept writing. I kept breaking the different stereotypes, And eventually, yes, it got a large, it got picked up by Wattpad actually. So they do this thing where they select a handful of books, and
Mm,
the website itself promotes those books on the newsfeed. And so Through Your Eyes got picked up, and it was featured on their website for around 2 weeks.
mm,
And so that's when a lot of readers started stumbling across it and reading through it.
okay.
And that's how it started gaining popularity.
Mm,
And then I got the messages from a lot of readers. Um, those who found my social media links, they would either send me direct messages on Instagram, or they would directly message me on WhatsApp itself, or even send me emails.
mm.
And they would tell me how much they appreciated me writing about it, and how much
And
they related to it.
how you were feeling at that time? Like you get all this motivation from all of them, and
It it was great because I thought, like, I have always wanted to make a difference, right? I thought, okay, fine, even for just
mm,
one person's world, one person's life, it's okay, I'll be satisfied. But
correct.
then suddenly there's this, like, messages flooding in from so many people saying that I made a difference in their lives. And you know, once
Of
you
course.
it the
Mm,
feeling is there's it's out of this world, you
yeah.
know. Because so Carmen, she's my she's the female main character of my book Through Your Eyes.
Mm,
So she grew up in this in a very toxic environment where she wasn't given the space or the room to talk about her emotions, to let it flow. You
mm.
know, she was raised in a manner that she always had to keep it bottled up inside. And
Oh, she's
when
being
you know,
controlled. She's being controlled. That's what you're trying to say.
it's more like, not that she didn't have controlling people around her, but
Mm.
she wasn't given that freedom, that
Uh,
liberty to,
yeah. Get it.
like.
Yeah. Mm,
So yeah, so there was no communication around us. So people, so the readers who could relate to her, who have trouble themselves opening up, those who followed Carmen's journey throughout the book,
mm,
like how she eventually learns that it's okay,
mm,
and to talk about the difficult things, that it's okay to there's this stigma around seeking help if you're not completely mentally healthy, and if you need help,
mm,
about talking to a therapist. So especially around the young adults, the early teens to the mid 20 people. So there's this really unhealthy stigma around getting help if you're depressed or you're anxious. And but with Carmen, the story ends, she decides to take that first step towards healing and opening up to a therapist so that she can get better.
mm,
So a lot of people really appreciated that, because they felt they felt trapped by the stigma too. They didn't want to be perceived as weak or dependent
mm.
for needing professional help if they weren't feeling very good.
Correct.
So so that made me feel really, it
Of
made
course.
it was really nice to know that, okay, fine, this person can feel comfortable in their own skin,
Mm,
because I let them know Carmen, or that this person is going to take this step towards healing whatever inner trauma they have, because I let them witness Carmen's journey.
mm.
So
Yeah.
that was really good. And as for the main male character, his name is Asa.
Mm,
And so this Through Your Eyes is based in the United States. The setting, the backdrop, everything. So my characters were also Africans, because I was targeting an international audience. Because at that time, all my readers on Wattpad, all the friends I knew, they were all
From other
None of them were
countries.
local. They were
Mm,
all from other countries,
mm,
mostly from the States and Europe.
mm,
So so Asa was he belonged to a minority community. He was a Mexican,
mm,
and so he lives in a city that is, predominantly white, and he attends a school also that is majority white. So he has that self consciousness in the back of
mm.
his mind every time he says something, every time he does something,
Yeah.
and he's always pressured not to make this mistake because it won't backfire on just him. It's gonna backfire on everyone he feels burdened to represent.
Mm,
So I think a lot of people who belong to minority communities
mm,
in several other countries, uh, it really I think they're really related to his character on a very personal level. So I got a lot of messages about that too, and even on the comments on Through Your Eyes in Wattpad,
mm,
they kept saying about how relatable it was, and
mm,
they kept going off on about their personal experiences. And that's the beauty of literature, because when when someone gets something down in writing, and then spreads it to the rest of the world, you realize how many other people have gone through that same
of
thing
course.
or are still going through it.
Correct.
So it your pain or your experiences, they feel universal, and
Mm,
suddenly you're not alone.
of
You
course.
know that
Yeah.
there are
Mm,
hundreds of people in this with you,
correct.
right?
Yes. Is
So
it?
that
i-
yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry. I wanted to ask you
Yeah.
because I was not that patient. I wanted to ask you.
Yes, no, go ahead, it's okay.
I wanted to ask you whether this book is available in the local market.
It's available worldwide on Amazon. They ship worldwide, no matter where you are,
Mm. But no,
and it's available.
did you find anyone in Sri Lanka to publish it like in the local market? No.
I do want to publish it in the local market. Just before the COVID lockdown started,
Okay.
I contacted my publishers in the USA,
Mm,
and I asked them, because if if a bookshop in Sri Lanka is going to import a large quantity of that book from my publishers there, I think it's going to come at a very high cost.
mm,
And I don't think any local bookstores here would appreciate that.
correct.
So I asked my publishers if they could share the manuscript with a local publisher here, and so that they can do local printing.
Mm,
And so yeah, so obviously my publishers over there will get a percentage of it because they have
of
the
course.
ultimate
Yeah. Yeah.
copyright.
Correct. Yeah.
But so they responded back to me. They said that they were willing to do it. It seemed reasonable to them, but I have to find a publisher over here,
Mm.
because once I do that, then I need to have a book launch. And right now, I don't think a book launch is possible with the amount of
With yeah.
crowd I would want
Correct.
there with
Correct.
the restrictions going around. So hopefully, once this gets better, I
Mm.
need to find a good, reliable local publishing
Publish.
house, get them to communicate with my agents in the USA, and then hopefully launch the book here in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, because I think it will be a very value-adding book because
Yeah,
it talks about real life and and
it
with
does.
yeah. So because with whatever you just told me, like I feel that whenever someone reads that book, he or she will feel that okay, so there's someone to talk to. So then, because then at the end of the day, the book will encourage them to go to someone professional and talk to them, and then make sure that they are relieved. I think you must
Yes,
publish it in Sri Lanka. You must do it.
I have to. I would love to.
Yeah.
Um,
So let's see. Well, to all the publishers in Sri Lanka, so her book is there. So if you are like if you are really willing to help her out, what I can do is actually I can share the contact details of her, and then you can actually take it from there.
That would be great. That would be awesome. Yes,
Yeah. And I
because
think,
I think
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, I think it's a pretty big eye opener, and I think our the youth in Sri Lanka can use it. Honestly, I think they really can use it.
Of course, because your book has 4.8 out of 5 on Goodreads. So it's a good
Yes,
book. So I also want to read it. Like, that's why I asked whether I can actually, buy it in Sri Lanka. But I'll have to buy it from Amazon, right? If I'm not.
you will have to buy it on. Yes,
Mm. So who's your favorite author? Mine is Peter James. I really love crime books, man. Like, my favorite book is called Peter James. He has this series called Roy Grace series. That is, Peter James is
okay.
a UK based author. I really love his.
I prefer reading UK authors too because my spelling and words are similar to theirs. Because when I
Okay.
read these American-based books, sometimes they don't like, for example, color. They spell it
Yes,
OR
correct.
instead of
And
OUR.
you are, yeah.
That is a huge pet peeve of mine. I cannot stand it.
Mm. So, who's your
So
favorite
yeah,
authors?
my favorite author is also a UK-based author, Agatha Christie. So
Mm.
she's the queen of crime. So I love her works. I've read a lot. I've read her books and I've watched the movie adaptations of them too.
Mm.
My favorites of hers are Sad Cypress, then S- Sleeping Murder,
Mm.
Peril at End House, Murder on the Orient Express, then Death on the Nile. I love all her books basically. They're all really great.
Mm.
But ultimately, I mean, she's my favorite author. But if you ask what my favorite book is, I would have to say the Harry Potter series. Like, no matter what, nothing beats those seven books for me. It's,
Mm. So, what message you have for anyone who wants to, become a writer? Like, there are a lot of people out there,
yes,
like, who wants to, who wants to share their experiences, who wants to express themselves, and they don't know how to do it. Luckily, you got, you had a friend, and she actually informed you about this Wattpad, and then you
yes,
went there, you started this whole thing. Um, what's the message that you have? And you may actually, share whatever the struggles that you have gone through, like when you writing the story and then publishing it, and like, dealing with these Amazon guys, and there must have been, much struggles, because anything that you achieve in your life, it's not bed of roses. It's just, you'll have to,
yes.
like, there are struggles. So you may actually, share them with our viewers, so then, they'll be also get motivated and go for their ultimate book.
Yes. Um, when I was writing Throughyoureyes, honestly, the struggle I honestly faced was it was really risky for me to write
Mm,
Asa's character because this was at a time, I mean, frankly speaking, when the whole I'm very much aware of the world, the politics, the issues, the other world issues that goes around. So this was at a time I wanted to write something about these racial discriminations and issues as well, and I thought of basing it on the US because it's a general place, it's easy to write about, and it'll actually reach a wider audience than if I had based the story in Sri Lanka or any other part of the world. And that there too they have the same. I could use this racial issue there as well. So writing Asa's character was tricky and risky because I was scared. Honestly, I was scared. I was like, this might anger a certain population.
mm,
If readers from that community are there, I was, I knew that I could get backlash for it.
mm,
And but I think for me it was, um, I did constantly debate whether I had to take that away from him, to not, to just make him a regular white character instead of a Mexican, uh, who was going through discrimination issues and, racial prejudices. But then I didn't know who Asa was without that, because those those obstacles that he faced for being who he was, for having the skin color that he had, it's what made him him. What gave him character, what gave him depth, what gave him the compassion that
mm,
he treated the world with. He was a very kind character who wore his heart on his sleeve and had such a huge heart. And he had that because he knew what it was like to be on the receiving end of um, bigotry and narrow-mindedness and hate, like unjustified hatred. And I knew that there were a lot of uh, people out there like that who
mm,
belong to minority communities. And for me, it was more important, more than my fear and of backlash and criticism. It was important that these readers, these people, are given a voice. That I give them a voice. That I build a platform in which there's a safe space created for them.
mm,
And I wanted my book to be that, my profile on Wattpad and my comment section on my books. I wanted it to be a safe space where they can share their stories and relate to my characters and talk about their experiences.
mm,
Because once someone says, oh, okay, this happened to me too, then there's another reader from another country who says, yes, we go through the same thing here.
mm,
And you see all these, you're, as a writer, you're bringing all these people together,
mm,
and you're building a network there, and you're letting them see that they're not alone in their struggle. And
mm,
you're doing that by by words, by mere words. And so for me, eventually, that won over the fear of um, receiving criticism for the content, because Through Your Eyes had pretty controversial content. I know that it's not a book for everyone. You have to have an open mind when you go into it.
mm,
And personally, as a writer too now, hmm, I don't much use profanities in my language. I don't swear, but in this book, most of all the characters were teenagers, and some of them, they use foul language, they
mm,
swear. And when writing, so now when I'm writing, I'm scared, because I think, okay, what if someone who knows me in my real life reads
mm,
this? And because there's a lot of content in that or the things that my characters do that I don't agree with. But I can separate myself from my characters, but it, I was afraid that the people who know me in real life wouldn't be able to do that.
mm.
And unfortunately, that did prove to be true. But I can't help it. Like the bigger, I had to focus on the bigger picture. What I was aiming at, the message I wanted to spread, it was bigger than my fear of what my community is going to say about me, what my community is going, to criticize me about.
Mm.
So it was a risk, but I took it.
And it
And
has paid off.
it paid off. It has paid off. I don't regret it one bit. It has paid off because I have to make my characters genuine. I have to be
Of
authentic in my
course.
writing,
Yeah.
in my characters. And if there is someone who is doing something that I don't agree with. Okay, I mean, to be frank, obviously I don't drink, I don't smoke. But if I have a character who enjoys doing those things, and I write a character like that, I mean, he's a good character. But he also like partakes in these activities. But you can't come at me saying, okay, Rahma, you justified this. Um, you're
Yeah.
okay with this, and I'm like, no, that character is not me. That's not me. It's just,
Mm.
but it's very hard
Of course. Mm.
for people in my community, and I think just I mean, a lot of Asians in general, to reach that level of open-mindedness. So that was there. Those were the main fears that I had while writing.
Mm.
Um, and I was at a point like not sure about my writing voice too. Like, what if uh, people don't agree? I mean, they don't like these characters, because I was breaking the norm and the cliches at that time, at that particular period when I was writing Through Your Eyes.
Mm.
The books that were being written and published then, they had very different messages, very different characters, and I was forcing myself to step out of the box, to break the barriers that
Mm.
society puts up and tells you that if you're like this, then you have to be labeled like this, and if you're doing that, then you have to be labeled like that. So it was like completely out of the norm, and
Sure. Mm.
I was not sure if I could pull it off, if people are going to like it. But like I said, eventually you will have to take that leap, and tell yourself uh, that you're writing for you before you write for anyone.
Mm.
You are your first audience, your first priority. Before you write for anyone else, you write for yourself. So
Great
that's
message. That's a
that's one
great
of my
message. Yeah.
that's one of the big main advice that I have to give to any budding writers, or those any closet writers who haven't yet posted any of their things online. You write for yourself.
Mm.
You are your first audience, because if you're going to go with the flow, and just if you're going to be a follower and not a trendsetter, if you're not using your voice. And
Mm.
when you're not using your voice, you're letting your God-given talent go to waste. And when you do that, you are missing the chance to leave your mark in this world, to make a difference yourself.
Right.
So yeah, that write for yourself. And also, sometimes writers, when I was a writer, when I was still growing as one, uh, I used to think, okay, but what if something like this has been written before? I know a lot of, because I get a lot of questions from my readers who also want to write. They say, but I'm so scared that this story has been written before. And I think that's one of the main questions plaguing
Mm.
writers' minds. So for all that I have to say is, yeah, maybe something like your story that you have in mind has been written before, but it hasn't been written in your voice,
Correct.
not in your words, and not through your characters,
Mm.
right? Because if you take any genre, they all have basically the same elements, right? But they still become huge hits, because what sets them apart is that author's unique writing voice and their
Mm.
way of storytelling.
Mm.
Because if you take dystopian fiction, you have Hunger Games, and then you have the Divergent series. And if you're going to take books about witchcraft and mythology and
Mm.
magic, you have the Percy Jackson series, and then you have the Harry Potter series. And if you go for the romance genre, one of the very common storyline or tropes used in that is where like the hotshot popular guy falls for the shy awkward girl. And you, for example, now that same storyline was used in the books that became a hit movies recently, To All the Boys I Loved Before.
Mm-mm.
So that's a book series. And then it's the same storyline, that trope is also used in Walk to Remember. But they are still both, you know, they're great works of fiction separately as well.
Mm.
That's because only Nicholas Sparks could write A Walk to Remember, and only Jenny Han could
Of
write
course,
To All the Boys I Love,
of course.
right? And only J.K. Rowling could write Harry Potter,
Harry
and
Potter.
only Rick Riordan could write the Percy Jackson series. Yes, they belong to the same genres, but you know, no other writer could have written those series other than the writers who wrote them,
You know
because
what?
they use
You
their own unique voices, right?
correct. You make so much sense because when I started this channel, I felt the same
Okay.
thing because
Okay.
it's a talk show, no? So there are a lot of talk shows out there. So
Yes.
then when I started this channel and when I did the first ever episode, I
Mm,
thought to myself, okay, so I'm not actually talking the same things that other guys are talking on their shows. I what
mm,
I need to do is I need to add value, as in like I need to get people who have actually achieved amazing things in their lives. I don't really actually care if the story is really big or story is really
yeah.
small. As long as it adds value, I would really love to talk to that person and uh, share their
Yes.
story. So to be really honest, I'm learning something out of you, like with this conversation.
So
I'm
you're saying I
serious.
made a difference again?
So yeah,
Okay.
so you make, like, for your age, you're so matured and you make so much of sense. Okay, so last question I have in my mind.
Yes.
Any plans on catering to the local audience with a new book? Like a book talks about Sri Lankan communities, something like
I
that.
am not brave enough for that yet, because I'm a very socially aware person.
Mm,
Like, one of the things that my readers and me, myself, what I love about my books and my writing is that I include a lot of realistic elements to it.
mm,
I even though it's fiction, I can't completely separate reality from it. I don't know. It's really hard for me to do as a writer. So right now, for me to write something based in Sri Lanka with all that's going on, I wouldn't know how to write a bunch of diverse characters in it without
mm.
including all the issues that have been going on for a while now. And to be honest, that's a little scary to do in Sri Lanka. Yeah, it's you don't you don't have that liberty here. The
But I feel,
backlash is.
yeah, but I feel you're a brave character and you have the talent to
I
do that.
am I am brave. I haven't reached that level of bravery yet. but I do hope to locally publish, because it would be nice, because I don't think, I'm not aware of a strong young adult book community here yet. I
Mm,
mean, I'm sure there are bookworms, but I'm talking about, from the perspective of the writer. Like, we could, I think Sri Lanka's book community has real potential,
mm,
especially among the 13-year-olds to 28, 29-year-olds, that young adult group. So, like, it would be nice to like publish something locally, and even if it would help kickstart other local authors around my same age group also to start with young adult fiction or teen fiction. That
mm.
would be really nice.
Yeah. So it's been pleasure to talking to you. Like I've learned so many
Same
things
here.
from you, and I heard a very nice story. And I wish you all the very best. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you for giving me a platform to speak
No
on.
problem. No problem. My pleasure.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.